What's up, y'all? Welcome to our NCAA Opinions of the Week. I'm Kevin, and I think as I try to figure out these introductions, I did do them last year, but new year, new us, first time as we're doing this more consistently. I'm Kevin. I'll say we'll go the three-man group on Outsiders Opinions. Jake is with us, our March Madness expert, and then, of course, my partner in crime, Austin.
Yeah, Jake, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Being a March Madness expert comes with its trials and tribulations. But hey, some days you're the expert, some days you're the fool. And last year we were a fool. But that's kind of the way college basketball goes. It's kind of what it does to you.
Yeah, it's not always kind, and I'm excited for this year to kind of rebound on what we did last season. But these early season tournaments have been very entertaining. I've watched a lot of them. But really, the question of this video is: do they matter for tournament success in March? Do these early season tournaments, the ones in Maui and everywhere else, kind of show you what a team is like when they're in a winner-take-all game? Or is it more they're going to learn from this if they lose and they could rebound in March?
I definitely think that these matter to a certain extent. One, you want to see how these teams play in tough conditions, in harsh environments, in, like you said, in losing your out kind of situations. Like these kids who are still young and still learning how to play in bigger environments need to learn how to play in these kind of games. And I don't think you can look at a team and say, oh, they won the Maui, then they must win the championship in March. But you at least get a sense of how a team handles pressure and how they move and how they communicate under pressure. And I mean, if you look at it, the last couple Maui champions have all been really good teams. Last year's was, I believe, Purdue. They made the national championship. Purdue was just on another level last year, though. But you never know, because the year prior was Arizona, and we know what happens to Arizona every March. And so I think there's a fine line, but we've seen Maui champions become national champions before, like in 2017 with North Carolina. And almost Purdue last year. And so I think people need to take stock in the ways in which they play, not necessarily the result, and expecting that to be what they look like in March, but just see how the players individually handle pressure.
Yeah, and on the other side from like success, do we think that UConn that struggled a lot at Maui and ended up losing a lot of games, the team did not look like how they look in March the past 2 years? Does that affect them? Do we think that they are going to be maybe a little bit worse this year? Is this the year that the UConn train comes off the tracks?
Well, it was already a tall task for them to try and repeat as champions, and they were able to do that. But to three-peat is almost impossible, especially with the carousel of players that come in and out of college basketball teams. And so last year, it was already tough for them to do it, but they still had the tools and they still had the guys. This year, they have actually lost a lot of talent. It's not just losing Sonogo, Jackson, and Hawkins, which they lost last year, but now they lost Newton and Klingon and Spencer. And so it's like 3 key contributors they lost and 3 more key contributors that they lost. And really the only key contributor they brought back was Caravan. And they had some transfers like Mahaney and I believe McNeely. They have McNeely?
Yeah.
Yeah, McNeely. But we need to give them time. I mean, transfers, I think with the new transfer portal situation going around college basketball, we need to give teams a little bit of time to adjust to the new teams that are showing up, like the new chemistries. And so I don't think people need to panic about teams like UConn yet. I mean, like we just saw a couple days ago, they beat Baylor. It was in the Big East, Big 12 battle or whatever. And so they're able to show up and win games, and they have some guys that I trust in Dan Hurley to keep them a consistent contender, because that's kind of the way the program is built now. And so I wouldn't be worried about a team like UConn quite yet.
Okay.
Jake, you or
No,
yeah, Jake, you talked about UConn, and I'm curious what Austin thinks. And this is really a new team. This is something that I think is beneficial from the tournaments. Is just you're away from school and just the other parts of life. I kind of see the Stars have done this where they've kind of taken a trip. To me, this really helps the chemistry of the team. I believe in chemistry, and I think it's especially important for basketball and for a new team like UConn. And they struggled in the tournament. So I'm wondering how both of y'all feel on just kind of the chemistry part that can come from these tournaments.
Yeah, I'll go first. It really is the first taste for freshmen. So whenever you come into the season, you usually don't play all that great of teams your first couple games to kind of get into it, kind of get a feel. So the freshmen aren't really tested. I can definitely say for like the games I went to for Arkansas when they were playing these really bad teams, it seemed like the offense wasn't right. We were still winning by 40 or 50, but the offense didn't seem really right. Those tournaments that you go to kind of help you realize who your stars are going to be. You play really quick. Your games are all really back to back to back to back to back. So you are tired and you really just rely on your teammates to get wins, and that's something you're going to have to do in March. So I definitely think that it helps you understand how your team is going to flow. But also, if you have a bad tournament, you definitely know what to change because you played a lot of good teams in those tournaments, and this will help you see, hey, where are our holes and what do we need to fix come March.
Yeah, Jake, any other thoughts to add on? Or
Yeah, you get kids and you put them in a situation where, like you said, they're away from school, they're only focused on basketball and where they're going. But um, it's it's interesting to see the ways in which, like, the behind the scenes stuff. Like, it's not just on the court. You see teams like you put them in a situation where they're surrounded by fun and distractions, and the teams that go to Maui get to experience Hawaii, and they get to experience all these places and they get to go to performances and have all this fun and go to resorts and all this stuff. And it really, which is part of the experience, the amazing experience of these tournaments, and especially Maui. And I think it helps the team, like you said, team bonding and team chemistry, and in small in ways in which you don't see on a court. And it can really create the bench atmosphere and the locker room atmosphere that the teams in March want to have. And so I don't know, it's not as important to see the like the chemistry is always very 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 important, but um you'll see, I don't know, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's good just to see the players, especially the young kids, the younger underclassmen, just really start to get comfortable with their teams outside of just the basketball court. Like I said, talking about like the new transfer portal situation where you get teams that are just starting to come in and trying to bond, and those are great moments for them to actually start to build some locker room chemistry. And I think that also has some value that's not really seen immediately.
Yeah, something just to add. That was a great point. And you can't escape the guys on your team when you're at March Madness. You're going to be seeing those guys every day. Every day you don't have a game, you're going to be having team dinners, you're going to be having team practices, film sessions, and everything. So if you don't like the people on your team, if you don't get along, I remember during one of the early games that Arkansas played, John L. Davis would calling for the ball, calling for the ball, calling for the ball, and Boogie wouldn't pass it to him. That's okay against a team that we're going to beat by 50, but come March that can't happen. There can't be those miscommunications. And so if you guys aren't clicking as a team, just as a friendship, just as a mutual respect thing, you're going to have problems on the court. So these tournaments kind of get you where you again can't escape the guys on your team, and you just have to get used to being with those guys all day, every day. And then when you get used to that and can become good friends off the court, it usually does help on the court.
You talk about just chemistry and just how important it is, and you talk about bonding with team players. And we kind of talk about this is something that's beneficial of UConn while UConn struggled in the tournament. I want to go to the opposite side of Auburn, who won the tournament, but they're a team that made headlines where they actually did have to get away from each other from in a flight where there was a physical altercation, as it was described in the audio recording. So my thing is there a chemistry question from either of y'all with Auburn, even though they did win the tournament?
I don't see it. I don't see a question with chemistry when I watch them play on the court. They seem to be very, very in tune with their identity. They seem to be very, very in tune with who they have on the court. They seem very confident. They seem very poised, and they know their roles and they know their assignments. And I have not seen a lot of I have not seen a lot of issues with the way that they play on the court. It doesn't any locker room questions like we've seen with the plane ride and the altercation. It does not seem to be affecting them at all, because if you remember, um, that altercation happened and they came into Houston. It wasn't at Houston, but it was a neutral site in Houston, so it's pretty much a Houston home game, and they came in and beat Houston. What was not really a neutral site, which was essentially a home game for the Cougars. And so it seems as though altercation or any locker room problems aren't affecting the way that they're playing, especially on the court, and I'm not seeing it at all.
Well, the biggest thing with Auburn for me is that Jockey Howard was the guy that really wanted the ball, and didn't get it. He hasn't played since that altercation. So I think the coach is just playing the guys that obviously avoided that altercation and are not freshmen, are either the transfers or any of the older guys that have been there for a while, and just using them, the more experienced ones, the ones that are okay, sometimes making the extra pass. So I think that's why I'm not worried about it, is the guys who were really involved in the altercation aren't playing on the court. So I don't really know how we could see it be a big problem if those guys aren't the main ones. Now, if it was Donai Broom and he was the one that was really mad, okay, we have a problem. But it's not. And it's guys that aren't really going to be playing all that much this season, and therefore I don't think really impact how I see them as a team.
I mean, yeah, it's Jockey Howard was like, he's young, he's a freshman, so I don't know what business he has trying to like cause altercations. Like you're the young guy, sit down and like learn some stuff. But who was the other guy? The Hudson, I think, was the other guy.
Yeah, senior
Hudson.
forward Jaheim Hudson.
Yeah, he doesn't play.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's either the people who were in the altercation, the ones who were actually fighting.
Not to be harsh or anything, but they're not playing, and so it almost seems useless. Like just the altercation didn't even matter at all. I'm pretty sure it's more of like I'm pretty sure an altercation like that would make the other guys go, okay, we need to be better. We need to it would motivate them to even be better teammates in a sense. And so the guys that are actually playing, like Janai and Baker Mazzara and Pettiford and Chaney Johnson and Denver Jones, like those guys never had any issues, never had any problems, and it's showing on the court. They look strong. This is the strongest I have seen a Bruce Pearl team look, I think, in my opinion. Like even
the only one I would go higher is 2019. I think 2019, once they got to the tournament, was pretty crazy. But I definitely think this year can compete with that.
Yeah.
All right. So my final question, then I'll turn it over to Austin, is we talk about the Maui tournament. That definitely had some eye-catching. Do you think there's a tournament, these early season tournaments, that stand out to you of, oh, this team's playing in that tournament, I need to watch that and see how they do?
Jake, I'll let you go first.
I wouldn't say so. I think the Maui is always a fun tournament to watch. I think the Battle for Atlantis is also always fun, just because you're getting the best teams up against each other. There's no specific I need to watch this team in this tournament. It's nothing very specific like that. It's a feeling out process. These tournaments are a feeling out process to see how these teams look, like it's kind of like where you create the profiles for the teams that you start to watch when it comes January, February, March. And so when conference play starts. And so it's kind of like the conference play prior to pre-conference play. It's kind of like you're watching the teams mesh into the teams that they are becoming. And that's when I started like paying attention to teams like Iowa State last year, who ended up being the 2 seed in the tournament. And that's when people started recognizing North Carolina many years ago, or I don't know, Michigan State some years. They always make noise in these tournaments. And so there's no specific team or specific in a specific tournament. It's more of just seeing all of the main teams and like kind of just creating a school profile for them in a way.
Yeah, and I just want to, if you talk about like watching or teams to look out for, I just want to watch good games, and usually these tournaments have them. I mean, I'll kind of use this to transition into my next point, but Oregon played in the Players Era Festival, and there was a lot of good games. They beat A&M. I remember San Diego State. Obviously, Alabama had a lot of good games in that tournament, and when you're watching those games, it feels a little bit different because they are neutral site. The fans that are there usually don't get to see games, especially if it's like Maui or something like that. But these teams, kind of like what Jake said, aren't used to playing good teams yet, right? They're going to get to that point where they are, but before the conference play starts, you want to get used to playing really good opponents, and that's what they kind of use the tournaments for. But do you think that teams that do well in March, always like in Oregon, do you think it's a fluke that they are winning these types of early season tournaments, Jake, or is it more? Is there something more to it?
No, I don't think it's a fluke at all. Anybody who's tuned in, and you guys know very well how much I love teams like Oregon that are coached by guys like Dana Altman, guys who have done it before, and guys who just know how to coach basketball. Like teams like Oregon and teams like Auburn that win these tournaments, they're not flukes, because these are teams that just play hard basketball, and they know how to play the game, and the effort is there. And so I don't think they're flukes. I never really think the tournament winners are flukes, because they were put into a situation where they had to lose, like win or go home, and any scenario in those situations, like these tournaments mean something to these guys. They're not just like, oh, this tournament doesn't matter. Let's focus on March. Like they prepare for these tournaments. They want to win. They want to hold those trophies up at the end. Like it's a big deal for these guys. And so the ones who end up winning are the ones who poured it all out on the floor. And so teams like Oregon, it's never flukes when you see that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, so that's really all I have to think about it. So Jake, thank you for joining us on this. If you enjoyed this conversation, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We appreciate you listening, and I'll let Austin close this one out.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening, and please let us know what you think about the tournaments. Do they matter for how teams will play in March, or is it more of a wait and see?